verification platform SumSub, the continent's overall identity fraud rate fell slightly to 3.4% in the first quarter of this year, down from 3.5% last year in the same quarter. To discuss this and other regional fraud rate trends, we are joined by Tatenda Chinodakufa, who is the Regional Director for East Africa at SumSub. Tatenda, thank you so much for your time. It's quite interesting to see this move here. You describe it as having fallen slightly. What's contributing to this fall?
Thanks very much, Nastasia, for having me. Pleasure meeting you. Let me put it simply. Fraud in Africa is not going away. It's just getting more sophisticated and better at hiding. And what we have seen across Africa is that, even though old school document forgery is dropping, we are seeing a massive spike in things like deepfakes and synthetic identities coming on the rise. And this is mainly because of the fact that, fraud has become more democratized, particularly if you look at the rate at which AI has become more accessible to a lot of people. In the past, we used to associate fraud with tech-savvy hackers, but nowadays things are different. With as little as $20 in a Telegram account, you can subscribe to various platforms that actually sell service, where you can actually get deep fakes and synthetic identities at a very low rate. So it has become more democratized and more sophisticated. That's the reason why we are seeing a drop in old school document forgery, but an increase in things like deep fakes and synthetic identities.
We'll talk about some of this pivotal shift you're seeing when it comes to these criminal tactics around synthetic identities shortly. But what are you seeing when you look at the regional trends?
Thank you. So when you look at the regional trends, across Africa, fraud attempts are still high. As I mentioned, we are seeing, 1 in every 30 verification failing due to fraud, which is quite a significant number. And what's even more scary is how fraud is changing. As I mentioned, if you look at, for example, a few countries like, we start with South Africa, we are seeing a big drop in document fraud, but a massive spike in deep fakes and synthetic identities. And so what this tells us is that, fraudsters are no longer stealing your ID. They're now creating brand new ones with your information. Then if you look at, for example, West Africa in countries like Nigeria, which is, still one of the most prominent countries on the continent where we are seeing the highest fraud rate. Nearly 1 in every 20 applications that are being created on a daily basis online is fake. And this year in Q1 alone, for the first time, we've actually seen deep fakes dominating quite significantly. And we saw 192% growth if we compare Q1 this year and Q1 last year. Then when you look at countries like Kenya and Ghana, these markets are booming digitally. We are seeing this online. We're seeing new apps being built, new platforms being developed. But with this boom comes risk as well. We are seeing fraud attempts in fintech apps in Kenya and Ghana, more than doubling if we compare the figures that we saw last year to Q1 this year. Then we look at countries like Tanzania, which also is showing some worrying statistics. We saw 184% increase in synthetic ID fraud. So this is quite alarming. It also confirms the fact that the fraud landscape has evolved quite significantly. Because if you break it down by industry, for example, some of the industries or sectors that we are seeing, this sophisticated fraud targeting include the likes of online dating, professional services, which saw rates nearing 6%. Then what's even more concerning is the fact that we are seeing very high fraud rates in industries like traditional finance, where fraud jumped 35% to 3.22% out of all verification attempts that we checked in Q1 this year. And what this shows now is criminals are increasingly targeting financial institutions. Then when you look at some of the most prominent industries like crypto and fintech, these are also under attack, and they're getting hit the hardest, mainly because I think that's where money is moving fastest, especially when you look at the fact that these industries also have sort of like the least friction in terms of money movement. So that's the reason why these are also being attacked across the continent.
It's so interesting as you talk about the different, the fraud that's happening per sector. One of the industries or one of the sectors that stood out to me in your findings is what is happening in the professional and consulting services, which is up 5.6% for this quarter, up 11.2 year on year. Talk to me about what particularly happens in this particular side of things.
I think what is happening in the professional services sector is the fact that, fraudsters are also taking advantage of, some of the unique situations we've got in a lot of countries on the continent where a lot of people are desperate, mainly due to factors like, high unemployment rates. So usually these people are targeted and presented opportunities in quotes for them to either join an existing business or to join a very lucrative deal where they then become vulnerable because fraudsters are taking advantage of this desperate situation that we are seeing in a lot of countries across the continent.
Given the fact that we're starting to see this shift in how, criminal syndicates are operating, they're taking advantage of new technologies and all of that type of stuff. When you have your conversations with corporates, with businesses, as they try to stay ahead of the game, how prepared are they in either one way or the other to be able to deal with this internally?
I think from the conversations we're having, there's still a lot of work to do in terms of collaboration with industries, regulators, as well as service providers like ourselves, because there is a need for that shift in mindset. In the past, it used to be enough for you to verify a customer's identity, KYC only, which is no longer the case, because a lot of fraud is happening after you've onboarded users. We actually found out from our 2024 fraud report that more than 76% of fraud attempts happen after onboarding. So you've checked your user's identity, you've confirmed that this ID is documented, it belongs to them, you've onboarded them. But now what then happens is, now once these fake accounts or these fraudsters are onboarded, they now commit fraud from inside the system. So traditionally, the mindset has been, you confirm that this ID is genuine, this user, owns this ID. That's enough, which needs to change because fraud has become more sophisticated, especially after COVID. We saw a lot of development in the AI space, which made, a lot of fraudulent activities and developments happen, and made it easily accessible to an ordinary person to be able to access these fraudulent tools. And you no longer have to be sophisticated for you to launch an attack on a company. So there is need for that collaborative effort to change the mindset in the industry to have cover across the entire user journey. It doesn't stop at KYC anymore. It's no longer enough to verify a person's identity. You also need to monitor their transactions, things like logins. You also need to monitor their withdrawals, as well as even things like account closure to make sure that fraudsters are not, coming to your platform to cause these challenges after onboarding.
As we wrap up the conversation, we spoke about what's going on the continent and the different region. Where do we stack up if we're to look at ourselves against other regions like, Europe, North America, etc.?
I think with the growth that we are seeing in the digital space, we are seeing a lot of adoption, for example, for things like crypto. We have some of the highest adoption rates globally. And, that growth is also attracting a lot of problems for the continent. So I would say we are one of the most affected regions globally. If you look at our statistics last year, we saw that deepfakes alone in Africa grew 393%. And Africa had also doubled in terms of identity fraud from the previous year across the entire globe in covering various industries. So we are, I would say, getting popular for the wrong reasons, because fraudsters are also targeting us as our adoption rates are also increasing and innovation is also growing. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we need to catch up because fraudsters are not sleeping. They are developing new tools every day, especially with AI.
With that said, Tatenda, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to catching up with you as you compile and put together your second quarter report, just to get a sense to see how that data is changing and how it's evolving. Thank you so much for your time. That was Tatenda Chino Dakufa, who's the Regional Director for East Africa at SumSub.